Friends, we gather in the protective shelter of God's love to celebrate a life well lived, the life of Beverly Miles Chapman. We are free to pour out our grief, celebrate in love, release our anger, face our emptiness, and know that God cares. We gather here as one people across a great distance, across the distance of technology, across state boundaries, but knowing that the Spirit of God connects us in the love that we share for Bev. We also are conscious today of others we have lost, others who are still with us in spirit. And we come today to comfort and support one another in both our common loss and our common joy at having been a part of Bev's life. We gather to hear a word of hope that can drive away despair and move us to love. Of course, we gather today on an imperfect platform, which is Zoom and Facebook, and I encourage you to let this be a space of grace as there are always hiccups with technology. So just know that God will find a way to get the message through to us one way or another. So let's be in a spirit of prayer now, as I'd like to invite the Reverend Dr. Cindy Parker from the church in Sedona to open us in prayer.
Thank you so much, Pastor Sarah. Thank you to all of you who are joining us today. It is a joy to have you with us. Will you be in an attitude of prayer with us, please? Holy and gracious God, whose ways are not our ways and whose thoughts are not our thoughts, grant that your Holy Spirit may intercede for us with sighs too deep for human words. We ask that you would heal our wounded hearts made heavy by our sorrow, and through the veil of our tears and the silence of our emptiness, assure us again that ear has not heard, nor eye seen, nor human imagination envisioned what you have prepared for those who love you. We pray this through Jesus Christ, the firstborn from the dead. And all God's beloved said, Amen.
And now, if you would please join me in singing our opening hymn, Take My Life, God, Let It Be, and also enjoy some images from Bev's life, more to follow.
Take my life, God, let it be consecrated, faithful me. Take my moments and my days, let them flow in ceaseless praise. Take my spirit, let it move at the impulse of your love. Take my intellect and use all its powers as you choose. Take my will, your will be done. Make your will and mine be one. Take my heart and by your grace, make of it your dwelling place. Take my love and help it grow. Let my loving overflow. Take me now and help me be part of Christ's community.
Well, let's hear now the story of Bev's life in her own words.
The start of this story actually began on October 31st, 1938, when I was born on Halloween in Columbus, Mississippi. After high school, I attended Mississippi State College for the summer and Mississippi State College for Women my freshman year. At that point, I decided to go north to school and transferred to Nashville, Tennessee, to what was then called George Peabody College for Teachers. It has since become under the aegis of Vanderbilt University. I graduated when I was 20, worked in Glacier National Park in Montana that summer and the following one, then started teaching 5th grade in Golden, Colorado in 1959. Many of the students were already taller than I was. Among my pastimes that I enjoyed in Colorado were skiing and folk dancing. One of the guys I danced with, Charles Miles, was getting his master's degree at the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. By the end of my second year of teaching, we were married. The next year, he was accepted for his PhD program at the University of Arizona, which brought about a move to Tucson. I taught 2 years there before we were blessed with a son, Chuck. My husband had completed his doctoral program in geology by this time and accepted a position with Alcoa in Suriname, South America. We lived in a little jungle village, 2 hours and 2 ferry boat rides from Paramaribo, the capital. There were 26 families, mostly Dutch, with only one other American family in the village. We later moved to Angola, Africa for 2.5 years when he was working in exploration for Cabinda Gulf on offshore oil rigs. By this time, we were blessed with another son, John. Our last post overseas for a year could be the envy of everyone. We were in Rome, Italy for a year before moving back to the States. It was an education in culture, languages, different kinds of travel, and meeting international friends that far exceeded any classes I ever took. I loved it all, except for having the Asian flu a week before Christmas, spending a month in the Italian hospital and almost dying. However, spending a year in Italy was magnificent. Upon our return to the States, we moved many times in the course of my son's growing up years. At one time, I counted up the number of times we relocated in 13 years, and it was 35 times on 4 different continents. We finally settled in Colorado on 40 acres of pine forest overlooking Pikes Peak across the plains and built a house ourselves, starting out in a tent for us and a lean-to for the boys when they were 4 and 6. Being settled was just what our family needed, in my opinion, but it became too placid for the boy's father. He became a globe trotter, going from one job to the next. So I found myself as a single parent raising 2 boys in the Winter Park ski area in the mountains, Colorado. What a thrilling place to raise a family. They had a 4-day school schedule and got to ski free on Mondays. While living in Winter Park, I started an art gallery and custom frame shop in 1977. This was perpetuous, as there were no frame shops in any of the towns in the entire Fraser Valley. My interest in art prompted me to volunteer to head the art affair in the summer, which at that time was the premier art festival in the mountains of Colorado. It was a juried art show, which took a year's worth of planning. It was a lot of work, but also a lot of fun and very rewarding for several years. After Chuck joined the Air Force and John went to college, I married again. I met a wonderful man who was retired from running the Denver dry goods department store, which later became the Denver. His name was Frank J. Johns. He had a ranch in Winter Park, Colorado. We figured it would be helpful to get out of the cold and snow, so we moved to Lake Havasaw City and bought a pontoon boat for swimming in the lake. Talk about jumping from one extreme to the other. We went from one of the coldest places in the country to one of the hottest places in the country. We finally wised up and moved to my beloved Sedona, Arizona, which is 4 different seasons in the high desert of northern Arizona at 4,500 feet of altitude, and build a dream home. We were especially interested to live there. We were especially blessed to live there for 2 years before my late husband became ill enough for us to have to move back to Denver. We discovered he had a cancerous growth in the right front lobe of the brain. After he passed away, I returned to our home in Sedona and spent a couple of years getting through the grief process and rediscovering life. As part of my re-embracing life, I decided to take a 50-hour class of learning how to become a Stevens minister, which is an international program for all denominations at my church. It occurred to me in church on Christmas Eve that there were many people who were struggling with suddenly becoming single again after having been a couple. So I started a singles group, which I called the XYZ Club, which stood for Extra Year of Zest. For several years, I worked with many of the churches in town with the Operation Christmas Child, filling shoe boxes with goodies to be sent all over the world. This was through Franklin Graham's program. In this way, I became acquainted with people from several churches in Sedona and the surrounding areas. Because I knew some of the people in this broader area, I invited them to participate in the singles club too. So we had 50 members, with about 25 people meeting in members' homes once a month. The organist at our church told me about a fellow who had just started coming to our church in Sedona to sing in the choir. He was a recent widower. So I called him to see if he would be interested in joining our group, and he said yes, he thought so. It turns out he had been teaching drama and theater to kids and college students for 30 years. So when I asked him if he would like to help us with Vacation Bible School that summer, which was a kids' musical, he ended up directing it. That's how I met Fred Chapman. We were married in 2001 and refer to those senior years as our life's dessert. It's a remarkable attribute to be resilient, and I consider myself fortunate indeed to have been able to embrace so much change in my lifetime. My older son, Chuck Miles, lives with his family in Hopewell, New Jersey, and my younger son, John Miles, lives with his family in Denver, Colorado. I have 2 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. Fred's daughter, Dana, who lives in Albuquerque, is the daughter I never had. She and Justin have 1 son, Alex. They are my spirit family. Not all family is biological. They have been so helpful and generous to get us settled in our new home and get our nest made here so that we feel like we belong. However, it doesn't require any kind of biological connection to feel like family. True family they are. Thank you all for adding so much joy to my life.
Amen. Let's hear now these words of scripture about love from a Sarah Cote from 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 15.
Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not envious or boastful or proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always hopes, always trusts, always perseveres. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. 3 things will remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Please join us now in singing Bev's favorite hymn, Make Me a Blessing.
Highways and byways of life, many are weary and sad. Carry the sunshine where darkness is rife, making the sorrowing glad. Make me a blessing. Make me a blessing out of my life. May Jesus shine. Make me a blessing, O Savior. I pray thee, my Savior, make me a blessing to someone today. Give as 'twas given to you in your need. Love as the Master loved you. Be to the helpless the helper indeed. Unto your mission be true. Make me a blessing. Make me a blessing out of my life. May Jesus shine. Make me a blessing, O
know that every single one of us could probably do an hour, maybe 24-hour tribute to Bev Chapman. That's one of the great challenges of services like this, is that we have so much that we want to share. This is just a small sample of the ways that Bev has been a blessing. And so know that today is just the beginning of us sharing these stories. I hope that we continue to share stories of Bev every day, not just today, but far beyond. But today, the first person who's going to be sharing with us is Chuck Miles. And I'm going to spotlight your video, Chuck, so that folks can see you.
Hello all. Thank you very much for this. I personally am in quarantine myself because I've had several office members come up sick last week. So I actually very much appreciate the silver lining of COVID and being able to do this remotely. Pastor Sarah communicated to me that my mother wanted me to be light. And so I'm going to try to attempt to do that while also express to you a little bit of what she was like. My mother volunteered to run the Cub Scouts because I volunteered her at a meeting. And so she stepped up, even though she was single, and she ran the Cub Scouts. I should say she ran my den. I was always teasing my mother about being short, my brother and I both. I'll never forget her turning to me in the kitchen and saying, you know what, that's enough. The only reason why I had the two of you is I needed somebody to reach into those upper shelves over there at the counter. Go over there and grab me that pot. I need it, it's on the top shelf. Another fond memory, and this will lead to a lot of knowledge about her. My father had volunteered to be a counselor at a camp in Canada. Well, he was already up there. And so she loaded an old Ford truck, strapped blocks of wood to the accelerator and the brake because she couldn't reach them, and drove us from Colorado to Canada in order to be able to go to the camp and see my father. And then she proceeded to drive us from Canada down to Mississippi to visit her mother. And they smuggled an old brass bell into the back of the truck. And then she proceeded to drive it back to Colorado. And we hung that bell out in the yard in our house in Elizabeth, and then next in the house in Castle Rock, Colorado. That bell ended up becoming the way that she summoned us back home after we'd been out playing. And it became such a tool that the neighbors' parents would then ask her to ring the bell so that they could call their children back also. This was way before the days of cell phones and any other form of technology that could do it. The bell did it, and it rang all across Castle Rock. For all I know, that bell is still there because it got sold with the house. I'm going to miss the cross-country trips to visit my mother and Fred. And I did one trip on a motorcycle, and I surprised them because I didn't want my mother to worry about being on the motorcycle. So I surprised her at the front door after having driven out on the motorcycle. I'll never forget the laughter that Fred had brought into her life and mine. And boy, am I going to miss the visits out to Albuquerque. That was the last place that I was in the service as well. So it was very fitting that she and Fred decided to settle in Albuquerque, and that's where I had separated from the Air Force. I hope that was as short and sweet as possible, and please forgive me if I've forgotten something. I did not prepare anything. I just wanted to share. Thank you.
Those are wonderful stories. Thank you so, so much. And we'll keep again, there's so many more stories that I want to hear, that we all want to hear. We have some more from other folks who've known her. We're going to start with Carol McDougall from the Sedona Church.
Good afternoon. My name is Carol McDougall, and I'm a member of the Church of the Red Rocks in Sedona, Arizona. And I'm honored to have been asked to share with you some of my favorite memories of Bev Chapman. The memories began soon after we moved to Sedona. My husband John and I joined the chancel choir, as we have done in every congregation where we've been members. I recall at the end of the first rehearsal we were greeted by another couple in the choir who came up to us and began singing the fight song from the College of Worcester. It turns out that they too were graduates of the same school. That was our introduction to Bob and Millie Carlson. We became instant friends following that welcome. The Carlsons took credit for introducing the game of jokers to Sedona. They would invite new members from the church and ask them to come and learn the game. We were invited to play Joker, where they introduced us to Fred and Bev Chapman. The Carlsons gave us an opportunity to make some real friends. After learning the game, these three couples asked us we would play with them on a regular basis. We played with them for nearly 10 years. I remember so very well the laughter around our kitchen tables as we played Joker. And Bev Chapman just loved to laugh. She had a very distinctive giggle in her laugh, which we never tired of hearing. We also played the women versus the men, so that each of us would go home with a winner. Bev and Fred seemed to have some difficulty arriving at our Joker nights. About the time we were to start playing, if we weren't playing at their home, the phone would usually ring, and Bev was calling to say, "We're running a little late." It became a standing joke between the Carlsons and McDougalls that if the phone rang as we were waiting, that we could always predict what the message was going to be. Bev was very instrumental in bringing the Shoebox Christmas ministry to the Church of the Red Rocks. She coordinated with passion that holiday activity. The Samaritan's Purse Project, Operation Christmas Child, collects shoeboxes filled with fun toys, school supplies, and hygiene products, and delivers them to children throughout the world. One year, I recall Bev was sick during this event, so she made a call to a member of the congregation and asked her if she and her daughter would be willing to purchase gifts that she could put in her shoebox. She sent them a generous check, which the willing shoppers used to purchase all of the items that Bev was going to add to her shoeboxes. I remember the hundreds of boxes each year, which were then shipped for delivery. Bev and I were also members of the PEO Sisterhood. Bev was a wonderful sister of the heart in every respect. She was a willing hostess and a participant in Chapter CM here in Sedona. When she lived in Colorado, she was also a member of a PEO chapter where she met Mary Carwile. Bev helped to organize one of our largest Ways and Means event that our chapter has ever held. Mary came to talk to a delightful crowd about her humorous autobiography called Heartstrings and Pink Ribbons, Finding Comfort Until There's a Cure. Mary was a breast cancer survivor. On the day Mary was to speak, Mary arrived, but Bev wasn't with her. Mary had been staying with Fred and Bev had a very significant fall that morning. It seemed as though much of Bev's health issues began occurring with that fall. When the Church of the Red Rocks built the columbarium, the Carlsons, Chapmans, and McDougalls bought 6 niches in a row. We knew we wanted to be together and reunited. After Bev and Fred moved to Albuquerque, we stayed in contact with each other. I remember the day when Fred called to say that Bev had been placed on hospice care. Imagine our joy when Bev called several months later to let us know that she had improved immensely and was no longer in need of hospice. I shared with her the memory of their calls prior to our Joker games. I teased her that it looked like she was running a little late about occupying her niche in the columbarium. I've never heard Bev laugh as hard as she did at that comment. Bev's passing reminds me that the mantra of the 6 friends who played Joker have always been, the last one in brings the Joker board. Rest in peace, Bev. Rest in heavenly peace.
Bev Chapman was my first ever older woman friend. Her friendship was a gift and a joy. I met her first in the book club, saw her in church, and was immediately aware of her warmth and sincerity. She initiated lunch with me and Kathy Morris at first, then later began our tea time visits to Figment's Teas, where she was a well-known and very well-liked customer. We would go to browse the teas and the decorative items, then order and sit in the cozy area with high-back rattan chairs and visit for an hour or two. Our talk roamed over books, life experiences, careers, and personal relationships, as well as talking about cogs and our mutual acquaintances. Her knowledge was deep and insightful. Her caring and concern knew no bounds, and her laughter and joy in life was a delight. One of her thoughtful gestures was to send cards she created with special verses and messages for holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, and deaths, including one for our dog, Oreo. I missed Bev a great deal when we moved to Texas, but we were able to chat a couple of times and to exchange cards. She was very excited for me when my granddaughter was born and always asked for Michael, whom she had befriended as well. Bev was an extraordinary woman, a rare jewel, and her friendship was a blessing. I will hold her in my heart as long as I live.
My name is Kimberly. I met Bev in early 2016, right before she went into hospice the very first time, and I became her caregiver. She was in much pain, and I remember one of the first things she said on that first day I met her. "Oh, I never thought I'd be a little old lady," in a humorous tone. Even in the depths of despair, she had a way of finding humor and beauty in life. Well, she graduated from hospice, as she liked to call it, about a year later, and we had many adventures in the 2 years that followed. Not big, monumental adventures, but quiet, beautiful, everyday ones. The kind you look back on and cherish, whether it was helping her make her cards, her teaching me how to create iris foldings, or taking a trip to Harvest Bakery to sample some fresh bread. Bev had a quiet enthusiasm for life that was contagious. A simple walk to her neighborhood art sculpture in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains, or a drive to an appointment became a fun adventure and a lesson in appreciating the beauty we are surrounded by in this world. I loved listening to her stories of the old days, her childhood growing up in the South, traveling the world with 2 young sons in tow, fixing up their manor in Fraser, Colorado, building a house in Sedona with her husband Frank, and meeting and marrying her soulmate Fred. As we moved through our days together, we would talk, try to name all the plants, trees, and flowers that we would pass, marvel at their beauty, or exclaim over a quail, roadrunner, hummingbird, or even an LBB, little brown bird, that would cross our path. Beauty always seemed to surround Bev, and she taught me the importance of thankfulness. One day, we were walking around the art sculpture, and I was grumbling about how my mother sold my piano when I was young because I didn't practice it enough. A well-worn story that I had lamented to myself about much over the years. She said, "Well, why don't you find another one?" A light clicked on in my mind, as though I had never even considered something so simple. That night I went online, searched free pianos Albuquerque, and with 2 weeks I had a much-loved 100-year-old piano. It was that simple and magical and washed away years of resentments I didn't realize I had been clinging on to. She used to say miracles do exist, and they do. I felt it was a miracle that I was given the gift of her friendship, if only for a while. She was a gentle soul who only chose to see the beauty and goodness in those around her, and I only hope I can carry on the lessons she taught me, among so many others. I love you, Bev, and hope to see you again someday. Every time I see a hummingbird, I think of you. Bye. Love you.
Hi everyone, I'm Shante. Bev was my dearest friend. She would often say we were BFFs. I cherished our friendship and I miss her so much, and I don't imagine that will ever go away. I remember the day that I first saw her at Church of the Good Shepherd. It was a communion day, and there's this beautiful procession of folks walking up the center aisle and receiving the blessing and then coming back to our seats from the side aisles. And as I was heading back toward my seat, I looked over and there was this beautiful being, and I saw light and love and the most beautiful smile. And next to her was Fred. And when she and I spoke afterwards, she said the same of me, that she looked up and she saw light. And I don't even remember how we first connected, but it was immediate. The closeness was immediate. And, you know, we really felt that we're woven of the same cloth in some ways. And that is such a blessing to find that connection. She called it a godsidence. I'm so thankful for our time together. And she was precious to me. And I know that Paul, my son, and I were precious to her. And in the last month when she was in hospice, I was so grateful to be able to visit and just lay my eyes on my dearest friend and to be together. And in closing, I wish to say that to be loved unconditionally and to love unconditionally is the greatest gift. And that is what we gave each other. And she'll always be with me. This is my Bev shirt. I got it at our favorite thrift store. Might have been before we had shared that we each shared the same favorite thrift store. So here's to you, Bev. Love you.
Hello from Florida. This is a short video I'm doing since I did not trust doing it in person during the service for the celebration of the grace and class that was Beverly Miles Chapman, my mother, a Southern belle that was gracious to the core, trusting, helpful, a world traveler, and never lost her joie de vivre, even though we might have had tough troubles at times, as does everybody. Quick anecdotes to share some fun things about her. When we moved to the mountains of Colorado, we didn't have a car. Well, she had a car, I hitchhiked. And so for the first couple years, everybody ran into my mother as, oh, you're John's mom, because I met everybody in the valley of Fraser Valley via getting rides from them, going to work and back and school, etc. So then we sold our car for grocery money, $250. But I taught my mother to hitchhike. There are, believe it or not, some successful tips to show people coming your way that you're not a murderer, etc. But I taught her to hitchhike, and then basically the whole valley started talking to me as, oh, you're Bev's son. So everybody started knowing me as, oh, you're Bev's son. So we got that period over, and that's how we were known in the valley for many years. Same valley was where I would fish for dinner, and she would always make once a month. We'd buy a big thing of ground beef, and she'd make the best spaghetti sauce in the world, or chili, and freeze a bunch of little containers and do that. So that's fun facts. Even in the toughest times, it was never feeling like we were victims and downtrodden. We were always the world travelers. So I hope everybody who misses her as much, I'm sure, as I do, can think of her celebrating her future in some very lovely area, future loved by all, continuously from us and anybody else she might run into in the future. So I'm sorry none of us are able to congregate in person during this odd year, and I hope that I brought a sparkle of light into your eyes, which came from my mother.
Good afternoon. This is an homage to Bev Chapman. What do I know of this Wonder Woman over the past 20 years? Well, I know what she loves. Well, me, of course. But also libraries. She said, if you can't find me, just look in a library first. She loves to read, of course, histories and Victorian novels and biographies. She also loves towering clouds, walks in the woods, snowshoeing, skiing in Colorado, camping and backpacking. She loves rainbows, waterfalls. She gave love to everyone she ever met, every kid, every cat. She cared for the world's deprived, the lonely, those with very little resources. She turned hardships into joys. Bev and her two boys lived in a little log cabin. They called it the Manor House in Colorado. Wind blew through the cheeks, cold, windy winters. And they made it into a warm home for the three of them. She spent a lifetime giving herself to those in need. Always paying it forward. She would much rather give to others than to herself. Her original iris cards are examples Dorinda taught her the technique and turned on her passion. Designing cards for specific people, works of art in themselves. And rather than throwing away beautiful thank you cards, Bev would collect them, remake the artwork into a new card, and send it to someone who needed a lift, a smile. Thousands of cards over the years of her lifetime. Cards which said thank you or I love you. Although she was not a musician, she loved music, whether it was vocal or instrumental, loved Dorinda's solos. And what did she give me? She gave me a home, she gave me a life, she gave me a reason for loving. She gave me joy, she gave me love. She gave me a wife. She gave me a smile when I was sad. She gave me a sly wink when we played. She gave me a reason for loving. She gave me a world to explore. And she gave me a life to be proud of. She gave me everything I could have imagined or desired in a life partner. And we became soulmates, true soulmates. She gave to her boys a path of love and honor and purpose. She gave to her husbands duty and love. Her husband, Frank, gave her security and companionship. I gave her laughter and the gift of play. And for her to be able to give, she was grateful. Gratitude for being allowed to give of herself. The world lived in and through what she gave that world. And that world gave her back the gift she so wanted, to be a blessing to others. You know, I thought that was to be the closing of my love letter to Bev, but it's not. I left out the beginning and the ending. Our churches. We met at the Church of the Red Rocks, Sedona, lovely. Church organist said to Bev, "There's a fella who just lost his wife, Linda, who might need your help." You see, Bev had started a XYZ club. That's extra years of zest. Social club for those who had lost their spouses. And she called me, Bev that is, and we met, and that was the beginning of our life together. She asked me what I did in my former life. I said I worked in the theater with young people. She said, "Oh, maybe you could help us. We're producing a summer children's play." Well, who could refuse Bev Chapman? I directed the play. We became involved dramatically and emotionally. We performed 3 concerts in the churches with 60 kids. And right after the last performance, we drove to Colorado where we were married. Thus began our journey together. It was also in the Church of the Red Rocks that she spent, she spent 13 years with her beloved shoebox ministry. Each year filling boxes for deprived children the world over, hundreds of boxes each year from her 3 churches. We moved to Albuquerque to be closer to family, and we also found the Church of the Good Shepherd. I found the choir. Bev found her place in the council, greeting people, writing welcome cards to newcomers. And we had found our social and spiritual families. When Bev and I needed help, you were there. You sent letters and cards and texts, visits, food. You were there. You were there when COVID descended on us. You were there when Bev was hospitalized. The care team put out the word, and you were there. You became our spiritual and social family, in touch and in love. We were never alone, for you were there. The Christas and the Arts and the Bobs and the Millies and the Davies and the Marilyns and the Carols and the St. Johns and the Mercies and the Asaras and the Marshes and the Carols and the Cards and the Carls and the Robertas and the Peters and the Daryls and the Mary Janes and the Sarahs and the Cindys and the Lindas and the Laneys, all the others, you know, you get the picture. You gave us love and caring and family, and you never let us suffer alone. You were there. And as Bev said over and over, I am so grateful. And so she is and will be forever. as will I. Thank you.
As we hear this next piece of music, let's let those words sink in. Think about our own connections and experiences with Bev, and be thankful for a life that was and continues to be a blessing. But Bev made it clear she just didn't want all of you to be the only ones that got to talk about her. She wanted to speak to us directly, and so she wrote her own eulogy. And this is what Bev has to say to us today. It says, "My spirit is here with you today to celebrate my incredible life. I'm happy and honored that you are here. Life is intoxicating. I have found an intense, genuine, and unabashed pleasure in it. If the angels surrounded me and told me I could choose one word to describe my life, it would be gratitude. There's been an element of grace that has always blessed me. My crown is my family, all of whom I am so proud. They are my legacy. Fred, my beloved, is the soulmate who has filled my life with love, laughter, fun, and joy. Our journey of learning together about our relationship has answered a lifelong dream I've secretly desired. We call this part of our journey life's dessert. One of our stellar teachers has been Elaine, who taught us the tools and strategies for celebrating a closer intimacy in relationship. Poster couple, she called us. We feel that it's better to have learned this skill late in life than never having had the golden opportunity to gain it at all. What a precious gift. Being a mom has been my greatest joy and accomplishment. Being human, I've passed on mistakes made in my family of origin. However, meeting the challenges, finding the solutions, and continuing to learn about relationships have provided me and my children and grandchildren with closer relationships. Among my most cherished possessions are my dear friends. The muse of creativity has often sat upon my shoulder as I have created and written notes to people that I wanted to encourage. How satisfying to feel that profound sense of connection to people who are special to me. Several have described me as an encourager. I like that. Being a part of the sisterhood of PEO has added a unique and rare community of caring for me. One of the greatest blessings of my life was the close and loving relationship that I had with my late husband, Frank Johns. I am so grateful we settled in Sedona and he built the beautiful and cherished home that we've enjoyed sharing with so many friends. Thank you, Frank. Other compelling joys have been traveling, living in other countries with differing cultures and languages, being outdoors, hiking and camping in the mountains, and reading. If I ever went missing, I would most likely be found at the library, indulging in one of my favorite pastimes. As I've navigated my pathway through life, I have always leaned strongly on my faith. God has given me the strength to survive and thrive in some challenging circumstances. In the innumerable moves I've made around the world, I have always found a church family to embrace me with loving and enduring friendships. An extraordinary fellowship has been my participation in the community of caring with the Stevens Ministry Program at Church of the Red Rocks. That specialized class has given me another avenue for being an encourager. It has honed my listening skills. My passion has been giving to underprivileged children in several venues. I've relished working on Operation Christmas Child with zest and enthusiasm. What a joy to pack a shoebox with items that a child can pull out with glee and pride. I have savored working with the esprit de corps of people who share this richly rewarding experience. It would please me greatly if I were remembered as being kind, compassionate, loving, and courageous. Thank you all for surrounding me with your steadfast love and loyalty, even when I was not up to my best. You are important to me. Take comfort in knowing that you are a significant part of a well-lived life as I skid into home plate. Let's take these words to heart and remember what a blessing Bev was and continues to be as we hear this choral benediction, also chosen by Bev. After the service, I invite you to stick around for coffee hour. If you're on Facebook, we have space for you now in the Zoom. So come on over. You do have to bring your own coffee. Sorry about that, but come say hi to Fred and offer your blessings. Fred, if you'd like to stick around, although if you're tired, then that's okay too. But come, come socialize with us and tell more stories if you'd like. And know that this is not the last opportunity we have to celebrate Bev's life. Let's live into her legacy and continue to let God's light shine through us the way God's light shines so brightly through Bev. Now to close us, this is Dorinda's gift to Bev. And of course, Bev wanted this to be an upbeat service. And so we will march on out of this service with the saints go marching in.
Love it.